At 2:47 a.m., a fresh satellite pass caught what many feared but few expected to see. 87 North Korean tanks, quietly ferried into Russia, now rolling toward the Donbass under a lid of darkness. Headlights low, engines throttled just above idle. Overhead, spotters whispered bearings, while drones traced circles no one on the road could hear. Was this a flawless night push, or a road built to collapse under their weight? Watch the minute that decides everything. To distant screens, it looked like routine reinforcement. But the crews inside those tanks didn't know the ground ahead had been measured for weeks. Every bend, hedgerow, culvert, and dead patch of signal. Ukrainian scouts mapped choke points. Engineers tapped soil where it rang hollow. Fire planners stacked overlapping arcs like netting. A valley on the map became a problem with edges. By 2:53, 3 tidy columns slid past blacked-out villages. Windows cross-barred, barn doors unlatched. Dogs that usually barked didn't. The road wasn't empty, it was listening. At 2:59, the formation dropped into a shallow valley. Fields boxed by tree lines, low ridges drawing a neat rectangle around steel. Recon flights had blessed the route. Officers were calm. The advance looked textbook. Armor up front, fuel and ammo staggered, air defense tucked in. Radios sounded steady. And that steadiness is why the next 10 minutes hit so hard. Ukraine had turned the ground into a funnel. For 21 days, small drones traced truck grooves and shadowed footpaths. Sappers cached charges where traffic would bunch. Decoys drew cameras away from what mattered. The trigger lay under a seam that looked like any other crack in the cold road. The lead tank's idler found the wrong patch of earth. Pressure lifted the hull and threw it sideways. A half-beat later, a secondary charge tore the escorting APC. Voices on the net thinned from confident to clipped. A third driver tried to pivot and met surprises wired into the median. Smoke went straight up and stayed, building new walls in the still air. Those mines weren't random. They were corridors, lanes that forced steel to slide exactly where the next piece of the plan waited. Vehicles crabbing around wreckage bit into buried follow-ups. Fireballs snapped the dark open and turned shadows into markers. The way back sealed like a door. The way forward became a mirror for incoming fire. Silence fell, the kind that means somebody else is counting. Above the valley, drones shifted from search to marking, IR beams touching turrets and fuel bowsers no crew could see. The guns on the ridges had coordinates already warm in the barrels. Crews didn't need fresh orders. They needed one word. Batteries spoke in a flat roar. Opening salvos smashed halted front ranks, tearing through plates built for other problems. In the center column, a ripple arrived on its own clock, punching command trucks and ammo carriers first so chaos could finish the work. Fuel wagons answered with towers of flame. The edges of the valley flashed white and orange. Every echo sounded closer than the last. Drones turned the night into a spreadsheet. Some circled high, tagging targets for guns that never saw them. Others flew low and mean, dropping small precision charges onto engine decks and open hatches. Each time a driver nosed for a side road, the fire plan flexed like muscle and erased it. By 3:11, the valley was less a battlefield than a furnace. Batteries rotated like gears, one firing, one reloading, one already reading the next grid. Shapes that had looked sure of themselves minutes earlier were now silhouettes lit from within. Short-range air defenses finally clawed at the sky, but jamming smeared their eyes. Missiles hunted ghosts and fell blind. The drones didn't care. They kept counting. The trap cinched. Shells cratered the pavement behind the rear column and stitched a bright seam across the front, boxing the formation in heat. A few machines still able to move climbed over wrecks bleeding flame. The reply waited above them. Air burst shells cued to altitude, fragments raining like arithmetic. Inside the hulls, crews ran out of things to try. Fuel burned, ready racks cooked, command nets tangled in their own calls. Russian batteries tried to answer, but counter-battery radars traced their lines and shoved rounds back faster than orders could change. Survivors learned a bad truth. You can't talk your way out when the air itself is taking notes. Commanders in the least damaged tanks gave the only order left. Form a blade, punch the front, anything but waiting. Engines wound up. Smoke rounds smeared the valley floor into gray. Turrets swept the ridges, raking tree lines with Koch's bursts meant to make the world feel smaller. Under that smoke, something quieter had been waiting. Along the hedges, small teams lay still with launchers across their chests. Javelin here, NLAW there, Stugna P deeper back on tripods. They'd held fire while the big guns wrote Chapter 1. When the breakout pushed into their box, they opened Chapter 2. Missiles climbed, turned over, and came down on roofs where armor is thin and heat is trapped. One strike spun a turret, another killed an engine. A third chewed a track and slewed a hull into a friend. Tanks that broke past one hedge met another team that hadn't moved because it didn't need to. Fire, relocate, fire again. Each course change added a new angle for something patient. By 322, the counterattack wasn't a blade, it was a scatter. Guns hammered tree lines where people had been 30 seconds earlier. Drones adjusted lasers. Artillery walked forward, sealing craters over places that had briefly looked like doors. Jamming smeared the net. Batteries that tried to cover a retreat were found and punished. Drivers who turned back through wrecks hit the other wall of the box. Mines the plan had saved for last. The valley became a machine with one setting: reduce. If an engine still ran, it drew attention. If a turret still moved, it attracted a correction. If a crew climbed out, drones wrote down where they went and guns erased the places they stopped. The big guns paused to listen. Fires hissed across the fields. The worst detonations faded into constant crackle. What remained split into three motions. A handful of hulls grinding and dying tired. Small groups running for hedges and barns. And radio voices searching for anyone who could answer with more than "I hear you." The answer came from above. Bayraktars that had held high and quiet slid lower, dropping small laser-guided bombs onto stalled hulls and trucks under trees. FPV drones flew through broken glass into engine bays that breathed flame. Each clean hit felt less like chance and more like bookkeeping. The column that had entered with 87 tanks and escorts was now a map of wrecks. Ukraine hadn't just stopped the push, it unspooled it. Engineers moved in pairs behind the guns, checking for survivors and wiring what could still be used. Bridges into the valley had been nicked earlier. Now culverts collapsed for good measure. Whatever might have been salvaged by daylight would not be. By 4:19, the sound thinned, less thunder, more hiss. Recovery crews rumbled in, threading around unexploded ordnance. Infantry swept sector by sector, pulling survivors from ditches and sheds, zip-tying hands that shook from more than fear. The ground belonged to one side, and it wasn't the one that had arrived with neat columns. Dawn showed the message better than the night did. The valley floor looked like a steel orchard. Black trunks, no fruit. Satellite images later caught the same geometry. Burned out rectangles exactly where the map had said they'd be. Clips didn't need narration. The sequence sold itself. Flash, glow, silence, repeat. Demolition teams set charges on hulls too dangerous to move. Approach roads cratered. Far tree lines watched for anyone who thought about coming back. Attempts to rush reinforcements sputtered against blocked routes and counter battery that had already warmed the coordinates. What mattered most wasn't just the count, it was the statement. Importing armor doesn't import immunity. With patience, measurement, and a plan that punished every predictable response, Ukraine turned strength into weakness. For Moscow, the loss humiliated. For Pyongyang, it warned. Hardware and crews don't change the math. By 5:58, the area was locked down. Fires still wrote slow lines into the sky. The column that believed it owned the night was now a lesson taught by the morning. The moral is simple and cruel. The side that owns the minute owns the fight. Ukraine owned the minute before the first mine lifted the lead tank, and kept owning minutes until the last engine coughed out. What happens next? Your call. Does Ukraine repeat this design or make it tighter, faster, harder to read? Drop your take below. I'll pin the sharpest one. If you want the follow-up, we'll open the quiet toolbox behind nights like this: mapping, jamming, and how a drone turns a valley into a spreadsheet.